always felt success when I saw my team go on to do bigger and better things, not regret that I've lost them. It's I've done something right, which means that now they're going and bettering themselves.
Now today, of course, we've got another brilliant guest for you, Tamara Strauss, whose career journey from a missed Tesco grad scheme to marketing some of the UK's most iconic hospitality brands.
I didn't know about digital. It didn't exist. I barely had an email address when I started in my job. We've had to learn about digital, then we've had to learn about social, now we're having to learn about AI. I don't want to be an expert in one thing. I'd rather be an expert at being a generalist.
Now in this episode, we're going to explore the power of reinvention, how a 16-month backpacking trip accidentally kickstarted a career in travel and hospitality.
I like to be that sort of living leader, that person who is approachable. I don't just want to be facts, figures and performance, because the people are so important to me in the whole journey.
It's honest, inspiring and full of practical wisdom. Let's dive right in.
So today's episode is of course brought to you by two fantastic organisations. The first, Studio Space, a leading on-demand marketing agency platform. This enables marketers to browse and brief agencies, receive proposals and start work all in one place. It's literally like having your own agency network at your fingertips, without the hassle, as they take care of everything from contracting, invoicing, procurement to legal. So check out Studio Space today. Our other sponsor, of course, is the Marketing Skills Trust, a charity whose mission is to make the marketing industry a better place, providing grants to help create a more equitable industry and help us to level up. The Marketing Skills Trust has been instrumental in championing a more inclusive, diverse and open marketing industry. You can find out more by going to their website. Okay, let's get on with the show.
Tamara, absolutely fabulous to have you on. I was reflecting about this interview and looking at your profile. You've just worked for some amazing, iconic travel and hospitality brands. And I guess I want to start by asking, did you have a sort of moment where you kind of went, this is why I do what I do?
I'll start with, I never intended to do what I've been doing. So my degree was in food marketing, and I was adamant that I was going to go and work for a supermarket, develop new products and so forth. And then circumstances were that I went backpacking after university. I missed the milk round. I'd been offered a job at Tesco on their graduate programme. I thought I could defer it. I couldn't defer it.
So you gave it up?
I gave it up to go travelling.
Wow, there you are.
I was given the really good advice is life will get in the way and you'll never do it after, you'll never travel later, because you'll settle, you'll like the luxuries, you'll have an income and you won't want to give it up. So if you're going to travel, go now and work later. And I think it was really good, sage advice. And I'm trying to do that now with my nephew and kind of go, do the things now that life will take over. And so I went backpacking for 16 months. I travelled the world. I came back. I moved to London. I had no idea what I was going to do, because the graduate programme was only going to be happening like 6 months down the line. And so I took up a temping job working for the marketing director of 40 hotels. I made a terrible PA. I never made a career doing that. But what I was able to do was talk about how I'd done a marketing degree and I wanted to get into marketing. And I'd just come back from travelling and how much I loved it, and the fact that it's something I can talk passionately about, and hospitality. And so a career in hospitality ensued, and it was literally one of those kind of unplanned moments in time where I took this chance to go travelling, do that, and it's just launched a career, so to speak. So the moment in time, I think I have been genuinely lucky to work for the brands that I've worked for. Not always by design. Sometimes, I think there's there's not been a massive career plan that I've gone, I want this brand and so forth. But I think it's kind of weird moments. Being able to work for Premier Inn, the UK's largest hotel brand, the scale of 85,000 bedrooms across the UK and Ireland, and doing programs like where we installed 65,000 new beds, mattresses in the hotel rooms over a 18-month to 2-year period and going, that's how we're helping the nation rest easy. It's this phenomenal achievement of marketing and product and customer experience that you go, this is what it's all about.
That was an iconic campaign, by the way, the Rest Easy thing. I mean, that was synonymous in the UK. I mean, it was an incredible piece of innovation from a marketing perspective.
Well, it started before I arrived in the business. So I think it started with iconic moments with Sir Lenny Henry,
of course,
falling back on the bed. And, you know, it kind of created this moment in advertising for the brand where the brand set out a very clear ambition to help people sleep well at a great price and putting a guarantee against it. And I can't take the glory for that. That was before me, but it's almost someone handed down the baton through my predecessors to me to say, how do we take the brand forward and what do we do next? And I'm just very lucky that I was there at a time during kind of the pandemic, of looking at the evolution of the room product design. So every 8 to 10 years, the room design gets updated, and we got to do that during my tenure. But also the beds, because hospitality is generally about sleep and making people feel, you know, the best they can be when they're away from home. And so it comes with quite a lot of responsibility to make sure you don't screw it up and you've got an amazing product that people want to pay for. And as soon as I say to people, I work for Premier Inn, they'll go, well, let me tell you about my experience at Premier Inn. I love it. I love Sir Lenny. The beds are amazing. I love the hash browns. And so everyone's got a story, mostly good, but also the bad ones as well. But everyone's got a story because it's Heart of the Nation brand. And I feel really lucky that I was given the reins to this iconic brand.
Love that. So Lenny Henry, aren't you and you and here best buds, aren't you? You're doing a keynote or a panel at a conference with him.
Best buds is a slight exaggeration. I'm hoping to grab a quick selfie with him tomorrow's conference, but we'll see if that happens.
And obviously, ask him to come on the show.
Well, clearly. Next up,
the shout out to Ali Hallen, the Rise conference, very important agenda. We'll see lots of the marketing community congregating around that. So life is a bit squiggly. 16 months of travel, back into work, and so on. Seems like you land jam side up. I'll come back to that though, because I just wanted to double click on the campaign, the Premier Inn campaign, and the commercial impact it had, because of course it got lots of marketing fame and it's, you know, everyone knows it and so on. But just tell us a little bit about the transformative impact it had in the business. Yeah,
so we started the work just as we went into COVID, and there's no playbook. I think, you know, across every sector we had absolutely no way of knowing what to do. And you've got the government telling you to shut down your hotels. Of the 850, we had to close about 800 of them. We had no right to keep them open. It was almost a search for where are the keys to the door, because we operate 24/7. So how do we lock the hotels? How do we make sure they're going to be safe for guests to come back? So it was a real kind of moment of, there's an operational side to it, but with wise and sage advice from the agency, and we worked with Leo Burnett, there's this moment in time where all of a sudden, you know, there's going to be this ramp back up and this idea of revenge travel, where people will be released again, and we need to be ready to kind of hit the market. So we had a creative brief that had been written before COVID happened, that then had to be tweaked because of the insights that we had about the market, how people were feeling, people's anxiety about travelling, and will it be safe, and will my room be clean, and what about other people, and what are your standards? So we pivoted slightly on the brief, and we had no idea when the government was going to say, right, that's it, you can go back out and travel. So we started the work in 2020. We pitched agencies remotely, you know, via Zoom calls. We ran the whole process. Pretty much the first day we met the agency face to face was the first day we were filming on location, because everything had to be done virtually. But we couldn't know the point in time to go live because of these regulations. But we took a good punt. We decided we had to book the media 2 months in advance. We took a punt in February that by May we would be able to travel again. We launched our advertising in April, and guess what? The government literally announced, just as we went out with our advertising, that after self-catering accommodation, you could go back into a hotel. So we'd done all the work. We had hit the nail on the head with our media planning and a gamble. And we were able to kind of come out of it really front foot forward, and really think about how do we reassure people. And the campaign was all about being able to rest easy with the Premier Inn, and we take all the worries and angst about travelling out of what you're doing, whether it's Airbnb, whether it is another hotel company. We're known, we're reputable, we've got standards. And I think that was where we absolutely struck it bang on right. So the team did an amazing job getting us ready. We had lots of operational challenges, silly things about, getting ice back into the hotels, flushing toilets, security, but also getting the marketing right and making sure that it worked for our team members as much as the customer, because these people had been furloughed for a long time. They'd lost their memory muscle. We had challenges, things like laundry. All the big laundry companies had closed during COVID because they didn't have to launder the sheets. And suddenly they'd lost the ability to move at pace. And, suddenly we had situations where there wasn't enough laundry in the hotels to cope, and the laundries weren't going fast enough. We were like, well, what do we do? How do we turn this around? And I think one of the genius moments was when we spoke to the agency and we were like, how do we communicate? And they came up with a brilliant line, holy sheet. And that was it. We put it out to all of our customers who were due to arrive, just say, bear with us. We're starting the business back up. We're working as hard as we can, but there's something that's come up that was beyond our control, but we're working on it. So it was just that moment of playfulness that we loved.
Love that line. Yesterday, I heard somebody said that they were launching a dog food. Bon appetit.
And that's it. Marketing can be playful, right? Yeah.
So again, I mean, again, great timing. Jam side up.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward to now, and you're no longer at Premier Inn. You're in search of your next adventure.
Yep.
I think the terminology is in between. It's not in the way of the series that perhaps we all know and love, but I mean, it's just a reality. There's tough times around now, and very senior, successful people, including yourself, find them in this in-between space. So tell us a little bit more about your perspective on that.
I think the first and foremost was it's important to take a step back and do a bit of reflection. So I spent the 3 months at the end of last year just stepping back. I'd done this phenomenal job for 5 years. I feel super proud of what I'd achieved with the team. During the course of my tenure, the company had record profits and commercial performance, part off the back of COVID, part we were working really, really hard to be the brand of choice and really position the brand as book direct and making sure people knew exactly where to go if they wanted to book a Premier Inn. But not only had I run the business and the marketing, I was also renovating a house. I did a year of house renovation. It's my second passion, and I think the thing that I love doing in my spare time. But after a year of doing that and the job, I was just ready for a break. So I've quite enjoyed having some time off. And now it's like going back to what's my purpose, what do I enjoy, what's the kind of challenge I want to do, but also some of the JFDI, you've still got to make an income and be thoughtful about what the future is. So it's trying to be pragmatic but focused, and find the opportunities. And there are a lot of amazingly talented people out there. The competition's really tough. I know it will land at some point. I just want to know where that point is so that I can take away the anxiety of it. And I think that's the hardest bit that we have to go through. So my daughter was talking about some emotions and feelings this week, and she talked about waves and, how it can be calm and then you've got these little ripples and then they grow and they swell. And I think job hunting is a bit like this. You kind of have that analogy of the waves, and, sometimes you face the rough seas, but it will eventually calm down. It will right itself. And then, hopefully we'll get to the calmer waters.
Lovely metaphor.
And we've got no doubt that it's going to just be amazing very, very soon, I'm sure. I'm really intrigued as you talk about, you're going on your travels and the adventure about what's coming next. And you're probably speaking to a whole plethora of different people across the industry, whether that's, I'm sure, search firms, whether that's direct and, recruiters and direct organizations. I mean, what would you say is perhaps the pulse of, what you're hearing? I mean, what kind of roles are people recruiting for? What kind of skill sets are people looking for? what are the ways that you can almost prepare yourself to kind of, fit within what they're looking for?
I think employers have kind of the advantage of choice at the moment, because there's so many people out there at the moment, whether it's through redundancies, natural churn. I think a lot of people took roles coming out of COVID, and we're in this natural cycle every 3 to 5 years and people changing. So there are a lot of amazingly talented people, which means that the employer can be really, really specific. They might have 10 criteria, and not only do they want the 10, but they want the 11th bonus one on top, which means that I think going back to, there's always 80% of the job that you can do, the 20% that you can't. I don't think you've got that luxury anymore. I think they want more than 99% rather than the 80%, which makes it just that little bit tougher.
Yeah.
And I think probably the recruiters are finding it harder to get some of the mandates. I think everyone's got someone they can recommend for a job through their network. And so you have to hustle and you have to work really hard. I think the 100 coffees that you need to go for are probably the 120 coffees you need to go for.
Yes.
And not only do you need to go through your network, but your network's network, and think really, really differently. So I'm trying to do it. I'm, trying to kind of stretch as far and wide as I can, because you don't know whether it's coming traditional, digital, coffee, or some other means.
And to that point, do you think there are key sort of skills and capabilities that seem to be reoccurring on those top 10 lists as you describe them, are things that sort of are the essentials that people sort of looking out need to have?
I think you need your basics, but the challenge is I think there's so much evolution going on at the moment. And even though I've only been out for 8-9 months, I think so much has happened in that time period with AI, tech, ourselves, we were just talking about, suddenly we're all using AI as kind of the tool that's going to help us in, planning our lives, doing job applications, our marketing activity. And unless you've got that application, I think it's quite hard, but it's happening at such a pace. So I think we're combining some of our traditional skills. I do believe some of the old traditional skills are coming back because we're so bombarded digitally that I think some of the old traditional media formats are not a bad skill to have at the moment. And I think there might be some evolution over time where we can get more personalised and direct one-to-one. Back in the old days, maybe even through snail mail, going back to some of that.
Are you saying even back in the office?
No, but more, could post be something, that real direct marketing? Because I think there's just too much happening for us to take it all in. Whether we're on our socials, whether we're on business feeds, whether we are on transport, I think it's really hard for people to take on board messages, particularly with the exponential growth of these small businesses. It's a competitive marketplace out there. So I think having breadth, understanding data, or how to interpret the data, not necessarily being the analyst, but having really smart people to understand how to do it, get back to one-to-one marketing, and also being constantly creative. It's never going to die, and you're always going to need to be clear about the brand, the promise, what the proposition is, and the fundamentals. And if the fundamentals aren't being looked after, I think it becomes even more challenging.
I love the waves metaphor. It reminded me, we had a brilliant coach, Laura Beckingham, on the podcast a while back, and she had a bit of a reprisal or a twist on that. She said that when you're in between, it's the liminal space between no longer and not yet. Mm-hmm. And it comes with frustration and uncertainty and ambiguity and risk, but it also comes with exploration, creativity, opportunity, etc. And I think that the ... is maybe life is to be lived in the liminal space. Don't try and get out of it, but stay in it. Anyway, that was just like a little sidebar. Yeah. Talking of side things, side hustles. You said you really love renovating houses. I always advocated side hustles. Like Richie and I have kind of made careers out of it. But I said because specifically it makes you better in your job. So what is it about house renovation that makes you a better marketer?
I think it's what makes me a better marketer, but what my marketing helps me do with that. So
both interplay. Yeah.
It's an interplay between the two. And it's project management, right? You're managing loads of different things. I don't need to be an expert in everything, but I need to have a good enough understanding. So I've always gone with this approach of mile wide, inch deep in what I do. So earlier on in my career, I was like, I don't want to be an expert in one thing. I'd rather be an expert at being a generalist. So I can't tell you about different brickwork and I can't tell you about heating systems, but I can tell you the principles of what I want to do and the questions that I need to ask in the renovation process. We literally took this house back to brickwork, knocked down the whole of the back of the house, rebuilt, kind of extended and all sorts. And I've got enough knowledge from having done it 3 or 4 times that I now know exactly what I'm doing, the mistakes I made last time, how I'm going to do it differently. Technology's changed in the construction industry, what are the things I need to think about? And I don't get fazed by it because I think within marketing as well, I'm constantly having to learn new things. So from starting back into, in the early part of the noughties, I didn't know about digital. It didn't exist. I barely had an email address when I started in my job. And so, we've had to learn about digital, then we've had to learn about social, now we're having to learn about AI. And so you've got this constant learning, but you've got the knowledge base from what you've done previously. And in exactly the same way, kind of through a renovation project, it's like my tastes have evolved and my experience has changed, but my purpose and my brand hasn't changed. So if you look at all of my properties, there are similarities in them because that's who I am as a person and my brand and my style and what I like. I haven't suddenly gone from being classic French kind of furniture, to something minimalist. There's been a similarity in the theme. And in the same way, I think in marketing, I'm always working with the brand and the principles and so forth, but you're just evolving and taking it further. And yeah, most people say to me, why do you do it? Because it's expensive, it's stressful and so forth. And I go, well, actually, I don't find it that. I get real satisfaction when I sit back and I go, that was amazing.
In flow.
Yeah.
I love the thought where you talk about continuity of style in this context around the way you talk about your home improvements and renovations. And I think, one of the things that I know about you is just how well reputed you are. And if I look at some of the string of awards and lists that you've been on, it's just been quite second to none. And from that perspective, I wonder, how do you see yourself showing up? What do you think is some of those key hints, tips and tricks around that kind of building that personal brand over time? And do you feel you're at a moment in time where the personal brand is evolving?
I think we all operate with an imposter syndrome, right? I think you can't avoid it. And I look at so many luminary figures within the marketing world and I go, why did I get a fellowship at the same time as these people? Because they've done some really amazing stuff and I really admire them. And I don't feel that I've quite achieved as much or done as much, or I'm kind of networked enough or whatever. I think we're always going to kind of compare ourselves. It's human instinct. I'm a bit baffled.
Wow.
I
don't tell me it's all by accident.
No, I've been lucky to meet some brilliant people who've shone a light for me or given me opportunities and trusted me. And I'm eternally grateful, and it's led to the network, the events, the socializing, and it's really apparent at the moment as being an in-betweener, the number of things that I go to and I keep meeting people. And I feel really lucky. And I think it's a skill that we've got from our years in the industry. And I only hope that the younger generation with the change in working life realise how important all those events, all that networking, all that personality and character building stuff is going to be to them as they grow older in the industry. Because I think, we were lucky to be part of those days of going out for lunches and going to loads of events, but I don't know if they get it in the same way. It's got to be in real life and it makes a difference.
So true. It really is so true.
You mentioned some people that you've learnt from, benefited from, being inspired by. Anybody in particular, 1 or 2 people you'd call out?
People who I've known for many years who've been brilliant. can't not talk about Gemma Greaves. I think, through her tenure at the Marketing Society, I saw her in my first events, talking about digital marketing at the top of the gherkin and where it's going to go. And the connections she's facilitated. I think Emma Harris is another kind of brilliant person who has done that. I'm going to say you as well. Mark, we've kind of met on many occasions, and people who give time and counsel and so forth into helping people through their career. Have I had enough mentors along the way? I don't know, but I've certainly had people who've taken chances on me and supported me, and I won't take that for granted. I want to play it back, and that's quite an important thing now through things like the Marketing Academy, the Marketing Society. It's like I have the time at the moment to be able to talk to people, and I've done it this morning. Talk to someone who is at a point that they want to confide, talk to someone who's experienced stuff, and I think it's a real honour. I really love being able to do that, and I've always wanted to do it with my team. So I always make sure that I have time with the junior members of the team and earn their trust, because there are times I need them to support me, and it goes two ways.
Yeah, thank you for the shout out. Pass to Rich in a sec, and that's very kind. But what I get a lovely feeling of, you're operating in a world of generosity, both giving and receiving, which is a very nice thing you've described there.
But that's what I've always known. So my family have always run their own businesses, and so there's an entrepreneurial side that it's about the people, right? And you can't do it without the people. And as much as commercial success, it's got to be about the people. And I always like to think about, if you love them, you set them free, you kind of give them the tools, you help them, you nurture them, and then you let them kind of find their own path. And I always felt success when I saw my team go on to do bigger and better things, not regret that I've lost them. It's I've done something right, which means that now they're going and bettering themselves. And that whole people side, I really enjoy. I think, it's been part of my journey. It's been part of the leadership. And I learn a lot from them. There are things about social I don't know. I'm going to get it from my team because they're way better at it than me. But I can support them in the elements they need to get the budgets and the confidence and the, kind of selling it in, because they're living and breathing it every day and they've grown up with it. I'm having to work harder to learn it. And I think the team are super important in that regard.
I love that you think of it as a two-way street. And I think that's so important that a lot of people sometimes fail to recognize when getting advice and mentorship and guidance, that it's one way. And you talked a little bit about what you get from a situation and the way that you learn. But I wonder, in the context of paying it forward and in some of the things that you do with your team and other people in the ecosystem, I mean, what would be, and I know it's fairly contextualized to the individual, but I wonder, are there maybe a few key things that you've learned along the way that you think are quite pivotal in order to forge a successful career moving forward, that you would typically impart to someone maybe a few years, more junior in their career than yourself?
What's for you won't go past you.
Oh, I love that saying. It's a wonderful saying.
It's super simple.
Yeah.
A very close friend of the family said to me many years ago, he's an incredibly successful entrepreneur or businessman, and he said to me, what's for you won't go past you. And I kind of use that in everything that I do. So yeah, I might be bummed about the job situation, but what's for you won't go past you. And you kind of look back at all the jobs you might have applied for and you go, was I applying because it's a want or a need? And the right thing will come along. And I think in every aspect of my life, if I found a house and it didn't happen, it wasn't meant to be. The job, the personal situations, whatever. It's like it's something that I try to pull myself back up with that saying.
You're gonna have to give us an instance of something that didn't go past you that you went, wow, yes, that was for me.
But going back to Tesco, right? That's the exact thing. I took that as I didn't take that job at Tesco because I did something else, and that has then kind of ended up being my career. Yeah. So that for me is a really kind of pivotal moment where I was like, I don't know what the answers, what's going to happen at the end of this. They can't defer my place, but the right thing will happen, and it did.
There you go.
So,
If you love somebody, set them free. Stingline, isn't it? Show my age. Remember that song? But it starts the conversation around tomorrow's leader. So what's the question? What's it like to work for you? What's you and your best and worst as leader?
I think I love the most when somebody in the team can come and talk to me about something which is so personal that they've got this implicit trust in me. And I've had quite a lot of conversations. I don't know whether it's because I'm a woman, whether it's because it's my personality, or I open myself up to it. But I like to be that sort of living leader, that person who is approachable. I don't just want to be facts, figures and performance, because the people are so important to me in the whole journey. So I'm more of a United Nations in that, I'm not an aggressor. I'm kind of more the peacekeeper. But I hope that kind of means that when you've got to dig in, I've got the team behind me and I lead them with them knowing that I've always got their back. And when I left Premier Inn, I was just overwhelmed at the messages of what people were saying because of those personal conversations. And it wasn't, we're going to miss you. It's like, thank you for that conversation, or what you did for me, or how I feel, and so forth. And it was a variety of different conversations. And I want to play that forward. It's a really important part of the person that I am, and whether it's with my team or my friends, it's trust. It's being there, good times and bad times, and then celebrating, kind of when you can together.
I love the notion of, people first and having a high degree of empathy for them. And in the context that, we've got the RISE conference tomorrow with Creative Equals. I wonder if you've got a perspective on whether you see any sort of injustices that sit today within the context of the marketing industry, and things that you would love to change if you had the magic wand.
What would I want to change? I mean, I've enjoyed the fact that I have a very diverse and an inclusive team, and I try to bring equity to what we're doing. And we tried to demonstrate that in our advertising as well. And I think one of my team really kind of made sure that I, thought about these things. And I got challenged. I got challenged by somebody with one script where we didn't portray a gay couple, and they wrote to me very, very clearly to challenge the thinking and why we'd taken that decision, and then the debates with the agency and so forth. And, they kind of really, they pushed hard on it. Ultimately, it was a decision by the chief exec, and I respected that, but I had to sit between kind of two very, very
the UN, as you put it,
the diplomat.
And two polarizing things, but make sure that they felt heard.
Yep.
And go through it and not just brush it aside. But when someone takes the time to write a letter about something they feel so passionately about, I think it's really important. And what we've done in the last couple of years, we've worked with Creative Equals, who really pushed the agenda to make sure, how we thought about our cast, how we thought about the crew, how we thought about the scripts, and, very inclusive casting. And it's just making sure that we were being really, really thoughtful about every single aspect. And likewise, I do it when I look at my team and, who the people are in the team. And it's not just about ethnicity, it's about age as well. And some of the best people have not been the young people. They're the people who bring a balance to the team, and age is not a barrier for me at all when I think about recruitment. So it's got to be the best person. It's got to be kind of making sure we've got balance. And I think some of the loyalty it brings as well, because they appreciate those opportunities. And so making sure that they've got to keep me real. I've always tried to be an advocate. I'm trying to do more these days for parents, and particularly solo parents, because I'm a solo parent. I've had my daughter and raised my daughter so far on my own. And so when I can talk to women and do that as part of the mentoring and supporting, and going, you can have a big job and you can succeed and you can do all these things, for me, you know, that's another one that, you know, they shouldn't be treated any differently, because you can do everything. You just have to be bloody organised.
Another representation of the living leader. You mentioned about being the diplomat between a CEO and an agency and so on. Now, many people who are listening in won't have had that much agency management experience. And from my experience, it's a real art form. So what are some of the things that you've learned along the way that have really helped you to get the best out of marketing agencies?
I think what I've tried to do, and particularly in recent years where it's been so tough and challenging, the more that they can understand the business, the better they can perform. So it's not just here's a brief, deliver on the brief. It's if you can understand the pressures that we've got as a business and the commercial trading performance and the challenges and the context, I think it's been a really important piece. And I've done it more so in the last 5 years than previously to that. Bringing all your agencies together is a super simple one, but does it make a difference when they're working, you know, on the same objective and the same brief. They might have different specializations, but at least you're all working towards one thing, and bring them together. They're not competing, they're actually collaborating. And I think calling out, you know, if something's not working, having the relationship with the senior team to go, this isn't quite right, or the person's not working, or we've got a little issue, can you help me sort it out? It's collaboration, it's partnership. And I think that's been the bit that's been really important. And also where you sell back into the business, right? Because you're this kind of middle agent, right? The business are asking you to do something. You're working with your agency. Your agency might go, this is the bee's knees, and then you take it back up. And the business going, really? I mean, my last campaign at Premier Inn, we bought quite a kind of strange concept to the executive team with Comic-Con characters. And people don't naturally think of Premier Inn and Comic-Con characters. And you're going, I'm going to have to send this in to the exec team, and I don't know how they're going to react. Because it's not your traditional business customer, it's not your traditional leisure customer, but it's going to be quite, you know, bold. Yeah. And so, you know, I was really relieved when even the CFO went, I love it, you know, kind of, you know, there are a few kind of builds, but, you know, you're having to go in and really be clear about how this is going to drive performance, but in a creative, standout way, de-risking the business, but using creativity.
I love that notion of when you put two things that cause a sense of friction in the mind together, because it creates distinctiveness. It creates standout, ultimately. And if we're not here as marketers to do that, then I'm not sure what we are trying to do. You know, Tamara, going back to the earlier campaign or some of the key facets you were talking about at Premier Inn, you talked a lot about the experience. In essence, the way the experience, the room renovations, and all the facets around it. And it's quite intriguing where, you know, sometimes as marketers, we get quite siloed into one of the 4 Ps. And yet in hospitality, it feels like it just can't be that way. It has to really all come together. And I wonder if what's your perspective on a marketer driving customer experience in today's context, rather than just sitting in perhaps the typical P that we all know that we might sit in?
So when I joined the business, I was asked about what I wanted my job title to be. And it isn't marketing, it's customer. So it's Global Customer Director. And that was for quite a specific reason, because it's not just about the marketing. It's about the experience, and because it included the product, the proposition, the ancillaries, and different aspects and insight. It wasn't just about marketing. So it's a blend of those things. And I think even the 4 Ps are evolving over time, because I think...
What's your 5th P?
I'm not saying there was a 5th P, but there are, you know, you go to digital conferences and they don't talk about the 4 Ps. It's more about digital and so forth. So I think there's some of the bastions of marketing, then there's kind of the evolution. But the customer centricity, I think, is the really important thing. Whether you're a B2B or B2C, you've got to understand there's no point having a proposition if the customer doesn't want it. You're going to fail at the first hurdle. And I think one of the really key things that at Premier Inn, everything was grounded on insight, whether it's market insight, whether it's the actual guest staying and the post-stay surveys of what's wrong. the customer journey, the pain points and what we needed to do about it. It's only about bettering the customer experience that you can then be truly delivering on all the levers of marketing. Because there's no point having a crap product that nobody wants to buy. You know, people love the bed. They come back because they're going to get a great night's sleep. You know, at Royal Caribbean when I was there, it was about adventures and going away and staying on an amazing ship and having these great experiences. So if that experience isn't great, people won't want to do it. They don't want a mediocre ship. They want something which is memorable. And particularly when you work in the travel industry, you're taking people away from their home comforts, and they're going to have expectations of it's got to be as good or better. And so you're constantly having to make sure that you've got something good. So it's hard. You're constantly innovating. You're going to have to do capital investment and so forth. But it all goes back to that customer experience.
So customer centricity. So my first decade was at Mars, and I worked in the pet care division for a long period of time. And Mars coined the phrase dog fooding, meaning people ate the food. Customer centricity, understand the product.
Mm-hmm. Did you?
Occasionally, I mean, when the Mars family came, like, you couldn't get people away from the stuff, but that's a different story. But this notion of dog fooding,
yeah,
and it just strikes me it'll be a lot more fun in travel and hospitality. So you must have had to experience the product yourself.
Yeah.
So tell us about the fun side of working in travel and hospitality and really experiencing the product to know what it's about for a customer.
Yeah, so I mean, even when we were developing the new Premier in Bed, so we'd seen a decline in guest comfort of sleep score over a period of time. So a mattress has only got a certain amount of longevity, and it will decline over time because, you know, the usage, and naturally the springs will go and the fibres will go and so forth. So as you've seen the decline in the comfort of sleep score, then obviously you realise there's got to be something that needs to be done. And instead of just replacing the bed, we went back to, you know, what do we need to deliver and how can it work better for the customer, better for the team members, better for the planet, and also better for the CFO, you know, and the numbers that sit behind it. And so we spent 2 years developing a new mattress, which was, you know, a really interesting journey, because you think a mattress is a mattress is a mattress. No, because, you know, the volumes that we were producing and putting out into the estate, it's got really big impact. So could we design better? Yeah, we designed better because we created a mattress that's got a spring unit that has now got a 12-year life, and then a topper that you could change every 6 years. Well, the net impact of that is there's less impact on changing the bed every 6 years, because you're only replacing the topper, which is the bit which goes, not the springs, because the springs have got much longer life than the topper bit. It suddenly became better for the team member, because the team member didn't have to move a whole mattress with the seasons. They only had to unzip the top bit and twist it around, so it was much faster. It was also lighter, so it was better for the team members. It was also better for the planet because we'd put in loads more sustainable fabrics. And it was better for the customer because not only was it a new mattress, but it was really designed with everyone sleeps differently. Everyone has got a different comfort level they want from bed. People have got different heat regulations. So how can we use fibres which will help manage temperature? And ultimately, it's got to be universal. You can only have one mattress that 100% of customers are going to use. So how can you find something? So we tested it, right? And we did the first trial and we got feedback, and even in that trial, you know, we'd done it all in one hotel. And we said, well, actually, that's not right. We need to change the methodology because we need to compare the current mattress, the two potential new mattresses in a range of different hotels with different environmental conditions, because what you have in London versus up north is different, and the experience, so the heat comfort is different. And different sleepers. So we got a variety of people staying in like different environments. It has to be long enough that you get really good idea of the comfort sleep. And, you know, I got to go with my daughter and we went bed testing. I mean, I'd pick her up from school and we'd go and stay in a hotel and we'd have, you know, kind of I had her jumping on the bed and testing the bounceability, because guess what? Every kid's going to do it. Everyone does that bit where you get into the hotel room and you put your bum cheeks on the edge of the bed and you sit on it and you bounce up and down and you go, oh, this feels good. And so, we did what we would do like in a hotel room, but we had a lot of fun doing it.
Oh my God.
Much better than eating dog food.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably. I love sleep. I'll tell you what. There we are.
And I still sleep on a Premier in bed now.
Hey, there we are. Fascinating. And I love the amount of effort that goes into finding the perfect mattress. There we are. Who would ever thought? Amazing. On the notion of sleep, I'm sure beyond the mattress, there must have been a whole range of other sciencey considerations that you must have looked at as well. And I wondered if there's some wisdoms you can impart for us all to have a better night's sleep.
Yeah, we used quite a lot of sleep specialists, and they were involved in the development of not only the mattress. It's the University of Lancaster, I think, off the top of my head, where there is a special sleep study, science, and so forth, and it's looking at everything from the environment, all the advice you get on downing, screens, kind of calming down, what you eat, what you drink, all of the advice. But it's trying to make it relevant and use it for the consumer. But, it's hard to disconnect. It's hard to step away from kind of the day-to-day pressures of life. But as long as we could design rooms that enable guests to be able to sleep better, and everyone sleeps differently. Yeah. You might like a blackout room. I hate a blackout room. I hated being on my cruise ships and being anywhere near an internal cabin. It freaked me out. I need light in order to be able to sleep, which is a bit of a weird thing. I like to wake up with the circadian rhythm of life. And so, it's how do you accommodate everyone's quirks?
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about risk and failure, and maybe the question is, what are some of the times when it hasn't really worked, when you passionately believed in something, in you or your team, and it just flat out didn't work? Because we've all got them.
It's like that interview question. You're like, geez, have I prepared properly?
Yeah, but I think the thing is to normalise, part of this show is about normalising taboos, normalising the tricky stuff. We edge into, the places we'll go. And so, we often talk about luck, and I think generally people who think they're lucky become lucky. It's sort of self-fulfilling. But flat out, we all have cock-ups. And so I'm just, my question is sort of, how did you provide air cover for others? You talked about being very nurturing and covering others, but sometimes we just make mistakes. So what's your perspective on that?
I did it with one job. I think, without naming the brand, I'm sure people can figure it out. I took a job because I was so excited about the brand, and it's a brand that I hugely respect. And I got carried away by the idea rather than some of the reality. And I got there on day one, and my heart sort of sank because I just felt that my purpose and the culture weren't what I wanted or reflective of me. And it's funny because through the interview, I was like, oh my God, the chief exec actually wants to meet me and interview me. And this is so exciting, but I'm never going to get the job because why would they give it to me? And then I got the job and I was like, yay. And day one, I went,
day one.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
what made you how did you recognize that on day one?
I think it was the welcome, and it was almost, there wasn't a welcome. It wasn't, because I'm people centric, I would want people to feel welcome, and I will have an induction and I will have, a really positive experience. And I didn't get that. And it then set the climate for the relationships in the business and the challenges and, what I was being tasked to do versus how it was going to be to deliver against that. And quick reality was, I'm not happy. I guess that was also quite obvious that they didn't think that I was the right person, and we found the right place for both of us, and that was not together. But again, I go back to what's for you won't go past you, because I didn't belong there, and had that not happened, then the next thing won't have happened, which kind of eventually led to me going to Premier Inn. So there is a story in everything, and you go, how do you create it? And I'm never shy to talk about it in an interview or whatever, because we've all screwed up somewhere, or we've all taken the wrong turn. But the course correction is part of the journey, and you go, right, that wasn't right, but I learned something, and I'll take from that, and I'll kind of, think differently next time. So now my questions when I do interview, and I'm at this stage, it's more about tell me about your culture and kind of how you work and the sort of environment and, the people side of it, and how you link back to the commercial and so forth. So I think you naturally, with every single one, it's all part of the tapestry of your experience. And I should have known better. I should have asked different questions.
I wanted to come back to you. You talk about the analogy of the wave. And you also talk about the fact that sometimes in between roles, there's a sense of, you didn't use the word constant, but I'll ad-lib, constant anxiety, or a sense of anxiety that comes along with that wave in between time. And I just want to get a sense of, how do you navigate through that? How do you stay positive? How do you stay high energy whilst going through what can be quite an unsettling emotion?
Because I want to demonstrate the right values to my daughter. And I think I've been surrounded by strong female figures in the family. Whether I think back to my great-grandmother in the war, who in the Second World War, First World War, she'd lost her husband, she had kind of young sons, and it's the JFDI. You've just got to get on. There's always going to be a driving force, and she had to pick up a business, didn't know about the business. She was in oil production, then had to pivot into coffee roasting and created a business that then lasted another 100 years.
Amazing.
And so, there's this resilience. And I think when I look at the people in the family and this resilience, it's like, I'm going to have to make it work somehow, some way. Yes, have your little pity party. And, I've had that with a couple of jobs where I go, oh shit, I didn't get it. But I've got to pick myself back up, because no one's going to give me a job if I'm just poor me. And I'll make it work somehow, some way. Is it, I think in this day and age, it doesn't have to be perfect. And it might be hard to find perfect. And I don't always know what perfect is. But as you pivot and you go into maybe different directions, it might take me somewhere completely different from where I thought I was going. And that's why I've never really thought about, what's my life plan? What's my 5-year plan? Because I think it's really hard to always stick to it. And the last few years of my career have naturally shown that if you sometimes don't take a slight deviation, I think you might miss things along the way. So resilience, openness to deviation, working the network, and sometimes having to kind of think a little bit differently, and listen to my mother. She's kind of the one who's always throwing ideas or random things at me, and it's like, that it just keeps me going.
Have a pity party and move on. That's a great little amazing, your great grandmother, and then the female role models, and then you talked a little bit about what you imbue in your daughter. You say you don't have a 5-year plan or a life plan, but broadly, in your daughter's eyes, what do you want your legacy to be?
It's already there, the sense of pride, and I mean, she gets it. And it's the balance of being able to afford the life we want, make her know that I've achieved it, but having the time with her. And I always come with a family first approach. I've got one child, and they're only going to be ones of everything, and I want to make sure that I'm there. And if it means sports day, she has given me real shit because I missed sports day for 2 years consecutively through no fault of my own. Number one, we were filming a TV ad the first year, and the second year I was doing jury service, so I couldn't get out of it. So for the third year, it was like she was going to kill me if I wasn't at sports day. And it's one of those really, really simple things, and it's almost respecting her and what's important to her by organising myself. So, I talk about how important it is to be organised and so forth. I don't know any differently. This is my one shot at doing it. But I can make choices about how I work, and I don't mind working the evening if it means that I'll go and do her sports day and cheer her on and get involved and do the things which are important to her, because I want to make sure that she's got those values. and understand the reason why I'm doing these things is so that we have the life that we have and we can enjoy our time together. And it goes back to travel industry, right? Because it's those times when you're not working that you make the memories, and that's the really important bit. So I've worked in this industry for as long as I've worked in it, because it's generally the time when you're not working. You work 48 weeks a year because you want those 4 or 5 weeks to go and make those memories. And when you get to help people do that, I think it's a privilege.
What a wonderful way to close this episode. It's been wonderful, and it's just been a real privilege to hear you speak about your reflections. I'm sure things are going to go extremely well for you very soon. It was a pleasure having you on, Tamara. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.